Hello, hello. Thank you.
So thank you all for coming, and thanks also to Perrotin for arranging this, and JR for the show. I thought maybe we'd start with the title, Outposts, because in some ways this is a new outpost for the gallery.
Yes.
But also it might be interpreted as a sort of slightly ironic comment on the status of the UK in relation to Europe.
I didn't thought of that.
Bobbing around on the edge of the continent, not quite part of it.
You can also say that about me and the art world, about me, and like, you know, I think you can apply it to many ways of staying, you know, something I like to say about the gray zone, you know, which is where artists always find an amazing place, and I think that's where it gets interesting, is when you're not in black or white, you're walking in that gray zone, and anything can happen in that gray zone because it's less established, there's more to search, and in my work I always try to think that a good project is when there's more risk for failure than success, and that's why I feel comfortable.
But I guess we're in this space now, which is anything but grey, very bright, very clean, very new. And I wonder how transferring the work from, say, the streets or from the scenarios we see in the photographs, the difference between that world and this world, is that a difficult transition?
No, because I've always included the two. You have to come back to the essence of it, which is, as an artist, of course, you have to create and share your work, but you also have to think of how you're going to do that from the beginning. And to me, the model of financing have been clear from the beginning, is that I would be self-financed and I will keep that freedom and I won't do like commercials. And so I was very clear with that, a bit like Christo and Jean-Claude. So in that case, I was like, okay, you know, the art world and the art market will be a great balance to support my work. And so from the beginning, and actually in London, because London was my beginning, I've sold artworks and I reinvested the money to create projects. So then I've always thought, okay, well, also my work in the street can be ephemeral for most of it. And so the galleries hold the pieces that would become the last trace of it. And the collectors that buy them are the gatekeeper of the only trace of hand mark or signed work that I've ever done, because the work I do in the street is not signed and it's way too big to even try to capture. So the only trace of my work are actually here on those walls.
I guess the other big difference is that when you're making the work out in the real world, you're collaborating with various communities. It's not just JR.
Yes.
We see all these different people in the works. And when we're in this space, it's JR whose name is on the window at the top.
That's true. But what it brings is different communities within the gallery space. And I think if my name can help with that, that's amazing. On the photo you see, for example, right here, where you see thousands of people carrying those giant banners, you have to imagine that each of them are like between 20 and 35 meters long. So it was, I think, 1,000, 1,200 people in total that are carrying those images. They all came because they wanted to be part of this performance. But when they came, they realized, oh, we're part also of a deeper message. Who are those kids? Why are we carrying them? Often people, there would be a group that would come because of the message, there would be a group that would come because of the performance and something cool that they could do that afternoon, and then realize what they would be part of. And I think that's what galleries and white cubes and stuff can allow to do, because it's suddenly like a cleaner space where a conversation can happen. And I've always included that in all of my work.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there's a sense or a tradition for some street artists to feel that moving into the gallery world is selling out. I would also argue it's a kind of French tradition, like a Guy Debord kind of thing. You know?
I've never considered myself a street artist, because why would you put any name to, you know, being an artist allows you to exhibit anywhere, you know, and so once I understood the power of the word artist and the fact that with this word you can actually do sculpture one day, do films or paintings, which is all of the above I'm doing and more, gave me way more freedom. So I've never seen that as a, you know, I've always used, actually, for my first exhibition in London almost 20 years ago, I had films also in my exhibitions, documentation of like to really enter and dig inside the project. So somehow my practice haven't really changed from the beginning of the way of showing it in galleries, have been pretty consistent.
And maybe you can talk a little bit about your relationship to London, because you mentioned just now it's where you had your first gallery show.
Yeah, I was, maybe 18, 19, I forgot, and I received an email from Steve Lazaridis and Banksy. They wanted to, they saw my work, and at the time you could see it on different blogs and stuff like that. It was way before social media. And they were like, we'd love to show you. Then it took maybe 2 years or 3 years before we actually put that show together. And so it was my first exhibition, and I remember it was in Soho. I showed some walks, and the first person that walked in, on a private preview was Damien Hirst, and he bought a few works, and I didn't even know who he was. I knew nothing about the art world. So I was really so naive about the whole thing that London was kind of like the place that put me into it and kind of welcomed me and embraced my work. And we got to do some crazy projects also in that neighborhood in Soho and paste a lot of giant images. So, and then I kept coming back and did a couple shows here with Lazaridis, or one with Pace Gallery and one at the Saatchi Gallery also, museum. That was the show that was at the Brooklyn Museum that was touring around the world, and that came here. So London had been a special place. The interesting thing about that show at Saatchi is that actually it was during COVID, and I only saw it once, and we couldn't travel easily. But then when I came, like this last few months, people were telling me, I went to see the show at Saatchi. And suddenly I saw all the people that actually saw the show. I was like, okay, so some people did saw the show. And I didn't realize that it was, a place that people went to during COVID.
Maybe we should talk a little bit about the two series that are featured here. So that's Deplacé-e-s and Children of Uranus.
Yes. So the project here is, it's one body of work, and that there's something about children that are a certain age, often between 8 and 12, and there's, but I don't want to be precise on the age, because there's just, it's not about the age, it's about that essence and that lightness that kids have before they realize the weight of the world around them. And the first image I took was this little girl in Ukraine called Valeria that had just passed the border right at the beginning of the war, and she was laughing and playing, and that photograph, I've enlarged it and then was carried in the middle of Ukraine during the war and became the cover of Time magazine, and still today it's like an image they use as an image of resilience and hope in the country. And I continue on that image, but in different countries, in Mauritania, in Greece, in Colombia, in Rwanda. And in all of those places, I photograph kids and would organize also gathering of hundreds or thousands of people to come and carry the child within their community. And so that's the heart of my work, is about process. It's about getting people together. And during those walks, I would of course meet communities and got to travel a lot. And it's during those travels that I also photographed the children of Uranus, because I would see on my travels all those kids that with the same lightness would play in the desert. But suddenly if you turn that image into a negative, they could be playing on the moon. It's almost like if you remove them from the reality, from the frame where they are, and then this image, they look like Greek sculpture, Greek gods, and you actually see, their soul lighting. You see the energy of their body coming out, and that's what I try to do. And there's actually between photograph and painting, because it's mainly painting, and I just transfer the base of the image. So there's no more paper here. It's just a transfer on the wood of the ink. And what it does is you feel you're seeing paper, but it's almost like a cast of the glue. The glue casted the paper, and when I removed it, you still had the cast of the, of the wrinkles of the paper in it, and it stays in. So that series it's just a very much more personal work from, that I do at the studio. And that is less known of my work, but that I've been doing. My first walks 20 years ago presented here in London were actually also pasted up on wood. There were different techniques, but what I mean is I've been very consistent in the way I've done artworks, unique pieces, and in a way kind of stayed away from the photography market, but more like creating unique works and with texture, that's really a big part of it. Now in this exhibition, you also see that installation in Torino, and on the other side of this wall there, you see all the kids together, because people didn't realize that at the time, when all those kids are together, they actually look like they were photographed together, and they're running together towards the same direction. And that was something that I've always thought of from the beginning, but that you could only see once we gather all those images together.
You mentioned avoiding the photography market. What's wrong with it?
No, nothing. It's just that I didn't know anything. I was just always pasting on the street, and my photography was being scratched down, or like I was always walking. I was most like I didn't know nothing about photography. So to me, it was mainly about like the texture of the wall and the architecture and how it fits the landscape. And I've never thought, it was almost like the glue is as important as the picture. The picture doesn't matter until it's placed somewhere, and at this specific location it will have that impact. So it's just a different use of photography.
So how did you come to be using photography in the work?
So I started as graffiti artist, and I was not that good, to be honest, but I was lucky to be next to people that were really good, and that's why I really felt that I was not good. And actually, when I found a camera in the subway when I was 15, 16, I grabbed it and I started photographing my friends in those tunnels on the rooftops, because those adventures were really like unique, and I wanted to capture that. And then I didn't know how to give it to them, so I would make photocopies of those photographs. And those photocopies, then sometime I would just leave one, in the subway, leave one on the wall, and I would put tapes, and I would say, oh, let me glue it so people cannot remove it. Oh, let me frame it with paint. And slowly, without knowing, I started doing sidewalk galleries, I would call them, like exhibition in the streets. But it's also because I've never done any art school or anything, so I didn't know there was like another way of doing, that you need to make a book and show it to a gallery or show it to a museum. I just had no idea of all this, and I think my naiveness really gave me full freedom to just go, and I thought that if you exhibit on the Champs-Élysées on the street, that's already the biggest thing you can do, It was such a mentality of someone who didn't grow up in Paris and thought that was the center of the art world, was the Champs-Élysées,
Yeah. I mean, given that one of your subjects here is children, do you miss that sort of sense of innocence?
It's a great, I try to, like, every day I'm like, how do I make sure that I protect that? I think we can all do, it's just, it requires much more work than we think to protect that innocence. Yeah. And it is one of the greatest things in any child. And you meet sometimes some adults that have it, and they always scare you a bit. You're like, whoa, But I think a little bit of that, there's a balance in there that's like, I think it's a recipe of happiness. Yeah,
I mean, it's one of the things that Matisse, who was one of the early writers in ArtReview, used to write about in the magazine when he was bedridden, saying that he'd spent all his life trying to grow up, and then all his later years trying to achieve what he had as a child.
Yeah. And there's all those quotes like "Don't grow up, it's a trap," and all of this. It's true, and I think what we find, and when we look sometimes at artists and why we enjoy their journey, whether or not we like their work, is their innocence, is their playfulness, is the fact that they walk in that gray zone, is the fact that they try things that might go totally wrong. But we kind of very admirative of that, because in normal life you don't do that. It have to be a success. It have to bring profit. It have to be in whatever. And I think that freedom we have, or we try to protect as artists, and not all. Some people take it very literally. Is something that brings something very unique, that brings us back to our childhood. Yeah.
I mean, I think looking at the works, obviously children are the ostensible subject, but as you point out in the text at the beginning, borders are another subject. And you mentioned Ukraine already, but you've also worked with Palestine, Israel. You work in situations that may be difficult to talk about and difficult to exhibit. Is going with children a way of dealing with those more difficult scenarios?
No, in the past I've dealt with very complicated situations with non-children. I think I'm not a journalist, I'm not a reporter, and I go there as an artist, so what I'm sharing is only my experience as an artist. It's just one perspective, it's not the perspective. And often I don't speak about the context, I speak about my experience through the context of what I've seen through my process, almost like a sociological experience, because in each of those places I try to do gatherings, I try to do common artworks, which can be like those ones where we carry a giant, piece of tarp that we all carry, or that we paste all together. So there's this sense of community into like creating something together. But of course, in different communities, it means something different. And so that's what I can talk about when I come back, because it helps you understand a situation, a context, through the eyes and through the prism of a different, medium than what you hear in the media every day.
But I guess it also allows you to talk about situations which are inherently political, in terms of bringing people together, roughly speaking, in zones where there are divisions.
Yes, 100%.
Very obvious divisions.
When we did the project at the wall between Mexico and US, for example, and put that little kid that was living just by the wall and enlarge him. What's my role to say that the wall should be bigger or smaller? Or what's my, all I can talk about is that I met this kid, I met his parents, and I'm just wondering what is the perspective of a 1.5-year-old throughout this wall that's in front of his house every day. For him, there's no borders, He doesn't know that this wall is like a difference between two places, two countries that he should not cross. And so I think art sometimes helps you look at the world from a different perspective. And sometimes when it questions you, and when it helps you question that perspective, sometimes change your perspective. Yes, it's a way of changing the world, because our world is only taken with the perspective we have on it, And I get taken in it myself constantly. And so often you need to be re-questioned to allow yourself to be, oh, maybe I was wrong, maybe things can be different, or it's more complicated than I think.
Do you see your role of an artist to sort of try and change the world then?
I wouldn't say that, but I think when I was younger and I would say, can art change the world? I would be like, it's a way of like raising a question. Now I'm actually very serious about it. I would still raise the question, but yes, deep down, I'm sure it can, because over the last decade, I've been trying to measure the impact, and to see, okay, how could you actually measure if art have a real impact? And on some projects, like the one in the prison that we might talk after, I was able to do it and to really measure and see the exact impact of what art did, and that really gave me confidence to actually come to the point that yes, it can.
Yeah, I mean, how can it, given that it's representation, not reality?
So I give you an example. When I walked into that super max security prison in California, it's been 30 years in the desert, one of the worst prisons in America. The fact that it was a bit lost in the desert also, they've never been a screening of a movie, never been an artist that comes there. They just had nothing, and it's like people in cages and, like you see in movies. I got granted a permit to walk in any prison of the state of California because the governor happened to have been in one of my murals before he was a governor.
Right.
So I had a show at MoMA in San Francisco, and there was 1,300 people, but literally anyone was in that mural, and he happened to be one of those people. So he remembered that, and then when he heard that I was looking for a permit, he gave me full permit for any prison of California. I chose that prison. I went in there, and then I said, I want to repaste the whole yard, and the yard of level 4, which is the supermax security prison, is in concrete. So that's why I chose that specific yard. Now, it's different gangs, they all hate each other, there's wars and all of this, so I really come within that context. Now, I photograph different people in that prison from different gangs, very naively, not knowing, and each of them recorded their story, but I didn't interview them. I said, I'm gonna leave a mic, you can share your story, and then people after will be able to hear it through an app. Now, I told them, I'm gonna also interview victims, and I'm also gonna interview guards. We did that pasting, and everybody pasted together, and even what never happened, the guards ended up pasting with the inmates, and all these kind of things that are little changes, but at that time you could say, yes, it brought light for one day in the prison. But then the impact of that image started to happen. It went all over online, and then people started to see, oh, what is that image? Who are those people? There's an app you can go, it's for free, and they would go in. Now, how does it actually concretely change? Okay. A guard comes home and his wife says, oh, I've seen on TV, they had chappies all over the news. I'm part of this. I've seen this, I've overseen this. Oh, okay, who's that guy with the swastika on his face? Or who's that guy with the tattoo and that? Well, this is inmate and they know the number. I said, well, yeah, but who is he? Oh, no, I've been taking care of him for 15 years, but I never spoke to him. And then what they would do at home is they click on the story and they start hearing the 35 minutes or the 40 minutes audio of that person. Now the next day that person is not a foreigner anymore to that guard because he heard the story. So what the inmates started to say is that often they would be being hauled when they would empty a whole like refectoire or gymnasium, and they say you stay here, and they would just wanted to shake their hand and say, I've heard your story, and why are you still in level 4? We saw that in the last 4 years you haven't been in any act of gangs of violence and you're still here. And because in those super max security prisons, even if you change, nobody will notice it. So then they started watching on them, and then they started say, oh, maybe we move you to level 3, and then they started moving them and observing them. They just suddenly be rehumanized, and then people started looking at them. Even their own family, their own children who would not come and visit them, started visiting them. Yeah. And then there started to happen all those bridges, and in the past 5 years, and we've done documentaries, it's been studied, there's universities studying on it now, we've freed like all of the participants almost that we had in that project. They closed level 4. We even went in level 3. Now they closed level 3. It became a level 2. The whole prison have totally changed. Many projects of art started to happen. I was there last week. It's a whole different world there. And you're like, of course, there's still those cages. There's still very violent criminals, and there's still people that needs to be in there. But there's also been a whole group of people that didn't need to be in there, or that have done their time, or that have been forgotten in the system, that suddenly were looked at, and then their life had changed, and they got on the outside. And I was going back in with the one that got freed, that came in to talk to those guys again. So it was very moving. You can see it on my Instagram. I've left a lot of those stories, and I try to, share as much as I can on this, because this is the only project, because it's within a prison, that we can measure precisely the impact, because you can know who goes in and out, and you can also know that there was nothing there before. But I've had noticed it in other projects we've done around the world. The only thing is that you can never attribute it to art only. There's so many different factors. But now I know that it's not because the art was beautiful, or it's not because my photos were sharp, or the pasting was perfect. It's because the process have made situations that usually don't happen. People had to talk to each other from different gangs, even if they hate each other, but because of that massive pasting that we had to do in a very complicated way, and I will always make sure it's the most complicated way possible, it forced people to be very focused and come together, and they even forget that they hate each other. They just want to make sure the paper link, and the guards even forget that they're guards. And it's really, you see that, and it's mind-blowing.
Yeah. This is Tehachapi.
Yes, exactly.
Prison. But I think also it's interesting that it's a community that was created around the art project in a way, even though they didn't really have anywhere to go.
Yeah.
But that one that you've revisited and somehow stayed in touch with. Does that happen a lot with your work, that you create these communities and then keep in touch with them?
Yeah, it had happened quite a lot. And in Brazil, I went there in 2008, and we did a project there on the favelas. And then we opened a school the year after, 2009. And now the school still runs 15 years later or 16 years later. So, I'm still in touch with the community. I've seen kids grow from like 7 to like now they're 25. It's amazing to think of, that journey, or in the projects where I started and when I did my first pasting. I've been working there for like more than 20 years. So I've seen the whole impact. The riots had happened, and then they destroyed the buildings, and then we pasted in the neighborhood. And now the work that we've done over those years will be installed as a permanent installation on the train station that is being opened next year. So it's like long, it's like people for 25 years, and they've only known you work in that neighborhood for all those years. So I have that with quite a lot of places where I stayed, in touch with the people.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a nightmare to me, like having to be in touch with everyone, like social media all the time.
No, but even not social media. I was just now in the cafe upstairs, and the prison of California just called me, and it was one of the inmates. I couldn't pick up, but they know sometime I can, and when I can, I just, if I'm with people, I say, hey, who is it? Oh, I'm here with these few people, and we talk for a few minutes, and when I can't, they know, and they just try to call back again. And
did you tell them where you were?
No, I didn't pick up because I was in a meeting, but that's exactly what, and they know I was just there last week, so sometimes I apologize with time difference. I wake up in the morning and I had 5 calls at 3 a.m., but they know, and they're like, no, don't worry, when we have those moments, we try you. And then each time I'm with people, I always include whoever's around. But yes, it's part of my work also to stay in touch with the community, and it's something I like. There's this one kid from the favela that I know since he's 6 or 7. He have helped us when I was doing the project there. And I've always followed that kid for whatever reason. He was always, you know, like he stayed out of trouble all his life, and then he started working for a school, but he always started to learn English. It was really impressive. And now for the first time, we got him like a visa. He's coming to the US to stay at our studio at the end of this month. So I was telling many people yesterday, we need to find him clothes, we need to find him that. And people, oh yeah, okay. Like then communities of different people, that's my favorite thing, that we don't know each other, would just come and help. You know, like I've pasted a boat in Le Havre with the dockers, you know, the dockers are like almost like a strong community of people that stick together. Since we've done that project together, anywhere I go in the world and I need their help, they would always come. You know, I needed to ship my photo booth truck to Cuba, and then they wouldn't get on the boat. They say, stop the ship, we're gonna make this go in, and then they would make it fit on the ship no matter what. And it's funny because like all those different communities play a big part. Or like the border patrol who almost arrested me in Mexico. When you see me having tea with him at the border, we stayed friends, and he came and he's on that photo here where all the people are carrying. He came as a as a volunteer. And so to me, it's my favorite thing is to mix those words, those worlds of people that usually would never meet.
Yeah. So you meet people on one project and then exploit them on another.
Yeah. Like, for example, the guy with the swastika that I met in the prison, then when he came out of prison, he removed his swastika and he done incredible work. If you see that movie called Tehachapi, you'll see why. And on my Instagram also, he traveled around the world. He came to France. He came to like different film festival with the movie. He came and helped on other projects we were doing. He met the border patrol guy from another project. They don't necessarily work on a project. They just meet people from another project, and suddenly people are like, oh my God, yes, we've seen you. So and suddenly it makes the world so much smaller and so much like, we form different worlds, but yes, we come with the same intention.
And after the prison project, you were at the Oscars.
Yeah, it's actually
so a different world, right?
Yeah, clearly.
So how do these two worlds fit together?
So I've been doing that only one night of photos every night for the Oscars. Even when I was nominated for an Oscar, I still shot that whole night because I didn't like the mingle of like all night. So I was like, let me walk. I prefer to create than just, drink champagne. And so we've done that. But the thing is, because the last 5 years we've been working that prison, whenever we go to Los Angeles, we try to mix the two. So it's always a really rough, like we're in the prison, super max security, and then the next day we are at the Oscars. And my team loves it also. It shows you like as artists you can work in all kinds of places, and it's a gift. And so I embrace it fully, and no world is weirder than another. It's just different bubble, different world, and I kind of like to do that and to be able to walk one side and the other.
Yeah. Which world does your team prefer?
No, I think they like the adventure, But sometimes when you do so much adventure, you're happy to see a glass of champagne at the corner.
I thought perhaps we might discuss Inside Out as well, because you, like as you said earlier, you used the sort of success within the art world to fund other projects.
Yes, Inside Out is a non-profit project that I started years ago, and it's very simple. Whoever in the world sends us their portraits, we're going to print them in pretty big format and ship it back to them for free. And then they will paste it wherever they want, and they don't even have to credit us. It just have to be portraits. And since we started, more than 500,000 posters have been pasted in 140 countries, and so many community projects are happening every day. And I'm not part of it. It's really their project. And to me, it's very important because it really shows that if the artist remove himself from the process, like it just become about empowering the community.
Yeah.
And so even when if now 2 street on the left there'd be like a big project, I would have to hold myself from going, because if I would go and help them paste, people would say, oh, Gerard, new project. Where if I don't go, it's whoever leading the project there, it's their project, and so I did the mistake at the beginning, and since then I never came back, or I go at night, see it, or I meet the people in a cafe later. But it's fascinating because there's been some amazing projects that had tremendous impact.
Yeah. And you started the project with money you won from a prize.
Yes, exactly, from when I got awarded with the TED Prize. And then after that, the project is really like, the posters are sent for free, but if you're like, oh, can I pay for it? You can actually pay for someone else. And so the project balanced itself this way, and then through our foundation, which is called Can Art Change the World, we have this foundation where we support our school, we support this project, we support a restaurant we have in Paris for people in need, and many other projects like that. We actually, raise money from my work or from donors, and then it goes to that project.
You seem like an amazingly optimistic person in a world that perhaps doesn't deserve optimism. I wonder how you stay positive. Are there times when you're in scenarios where you think, oh my God, what is this?
Yeah, I try to really protect that, like I'm trying to protect my naiveness, in a way of my child naiveness. Agnes Varda used to tell me, as artists, we need to remain the optimist utopist, at all cost, and so there's enough pessimists out there, so if we want to be original, let's be optimists, And so I try to keep that in mind, and even in a darker situation, you have to keep going towards the light, because you don't chase darkness with darkness, you only chase it with a little bit, of light, with even the smallest bit of light. And so that's what I keep, in my work at all costs, and it's just keeping walking towards light at any cost.
Yeah, but I mean, does that take an effort? Do you have techniques to do this?
No, it means that wherever you go, you try to see light, and you will always find it, but it's just sometimes harder. But there will always be something where you're like, oh wow, there's hope here, and we know it because you can do it anywhere. You can do it in London at any corner. You can see a plant coming out of concrete. You can see, there's many ways that there's signs, and you can see them any way you want. And I try to, it's almost like an exercise you do every day, and I guess it's a practice that I try to protect this way.
I mean, it's interesting you mentioned Agnes Varda, because the last time we met, you just made a film with her that was then nominated for an award. But I wonder, I mean, she's obviously one of your heroes. I think it's clear from the film. I wonder who else has inspired you
many
as an artist.
Yeah, I don't know, so many. Like along my journey, I've spent so much time like visiting artists, visiting studios, visiting artists like Christo, and seeing their practice and understanding, their journey. And each journey was very different. Each journey was like very personal. But through the gallery Perrotin also, I've met so many artists, and I always saw, okay, there's like so many ways of entering. There's not just one book you have to follow to become an artist. And because I had no idea that you could even have a job as being an artist, I was kind of trying to define, okay, what is the best things I want to keep out of this, journey. And so meeting so many of those people have been a big part, and the ones that I spend the most time, like Agnes, have definitely had a big impact on my life.
But so polite with the way you kind of included everyone else as well, without mentioning favourites. I think we've probably got time for a couple of questions. If there are, if you raise your hands, there's one at the front.
Yeah, firstly, I was also one of those people with the statue show.
Oh, great. Thank you.
I want to know, because obviously you do very large-scale projects. What is the limit, if there is a limit, and at what point that kind of element of community does that?
Look, it's interesting, the limits. I don't think when you start to enlarge, there's no really limits into it. To me, the architecture dictates it, So if the space is really, really big, you just have to just find more people, apply the technique in a different ways. Now I'm trying to wrap the Pont Neuf in Paris, like Christo did 40 years ago, so I'm working on this now.
Would you do like a country? Like a whole entire...
No, I mean, by the time you start wrapping one place, it would be gone by the time you get done. But if you wanted to do a human chain, you could. Like, technically, I don't see any limits in things. On the Pont Neuf, I'm doubling the size of the bridge. I'm creating a tunnel inside that's 300 feet long. I thought it was not possible. I had a meeting this week at the City Hall with 63 people from the police, the prefect, the people that take care of the water and the boats and this and that. And I really thought they'd say, okay, look, you can't do this. You gotta scale down the project. And they were like, no, we're gonna find a way for that. Let me see if I can divert the boats. We can stop the cars here. I was like, oh wow, actually it is possible. I was even pinching myself. So sometimes you know, you just gotta try, and then sometimes you get lucky.
There's one in the middle.
I'm interested to thank you for the talk. It's
Thank you.
Great to hear you talk live rather than on a YouTube or anything. So thank you. I'm interested in how you end up getting involved in the psychology of the people that you work with, and it just seems to me that it's a practice, that you have an artistic practice where psychology could become really important to the work, and your interactions with the people that you're working with become as important as the actual result. And I just wonder how you really deal with that on a daily basis, and if the sort of psychology of the cultures that you're within, or the type of people that you meet, you know, end up becoming quite important to your life and how you actually practice your work.
Yeah, I mean, I think of course, the way you do the projects and the way you interact with people and the way also your team, because I do this with a big team, and the way also the people that we work with, like in all those communities that share the same values, even if sometimes we don't speak the same language, is a big part of it. And often you take risk, you know. Even when I met those guys in prison, and some of them I was like, did they change? You know, you couldn't tell. They said, I've changed, but like, you had to believe they changed. And so it's a deep question. Can someone change? Can someone, it was a question I was not ready to, you know, raise that way when I walked there. And then I realized, you know, there's your instinct first that tells you often, and then also there's a big part of risk also in life that, yes, you know, you might get wrong, but if you're right, then it gives you so much more, you know, optimism and possibilities, but sometimes you might get deceived too.
Are there any more questions? There's one at the back. Yeah.
You know, some of your work is quite political, and most of the time, all the time, is quite humanist values, political because it's humanist, bringing religion together, you know, food, things like this. In the world where everything is so confrontational, you know, in the US, everywhere in the world, you see that. Is it some kind of a, not source of inspiration, is it something you want to work, or on the contrary, you prefer to stay away from this kind of, let's call it events, tension?
Yeah, I mean, I'll walk in the same direction no matter the political context, you know, of bringing people together. And that's really something that even more now, because of this, you know, more obvious confrontation that are happening, I'll go even more within that direction, you know, of bringing people together, of doing it in ways sometimes. Like when I walked in that prison, of course I knew that, yes, they are gangs and it's segregated and they don't like each other. But I've just pretended I don't know, you know, because I didn't really understand who's what, like which gang. So I just took everybody as one group, let's talk, let's do this, you do that, let's get together, you guys do a group. And they looked at me like, well, you know, and then they were like, you seem like you knew nothing. We didn't want to tell you. That we were like, okay, let's just do it and we'll tell him later. And then they realized, they were laughing when I have videos, you can see them also on Instagram and stuff, where they're like, you know, normally we kill each other, but now we're like, you know, but it's okay. They say, I say, oh, what do I know? And why would you kill each other? And it was really those kind of very, I think the fact that I came from so far away, I came right away around that table in that supermax security prison, and I said, guys, I thought it was only in movies that they would put you in cages and see this kind of scenario and the army is in there. And I said, so I know nothing about, so when you leave your audio, explain where you grew up, what happened, what led you to this, but speak like if you're talking to a child or to a guy like me who come from France, I have no idea about your context. And often that's like a key to overcome situations that are way bigger than us, or that if not would like freeze you to just even walk in.
I mean, I wonder if there are any situations where your charm doesn't work and where the project doesn't work out.
I've tried North Korea, it didn't work. I went there, you know, I need to work a little bit more.
Well, I think that's the end of the time we have for the talk, but I'd like to thank you all for coming, and particularly thank JR.